and Iraqi and Kurdish forces have announced a pause in their military advance on Mosul just a day after the offensive was launched. Commanders have given conflicting reasons for the delay. Well, for more on that, we can speak to Andreas Krieg. He's an assistant professor in defence at King's College in London. He's joining us from Doha. Andreas, good to speak to you this morning on TRT World. So in light of what we've just reported, this pause in fighting, what do you make so far of the advance on Mosul?
Right, so far I think we've seen quite a rapid advance yesterday. I think all sides of the coalition were more successful than expected, were relatively quick in seizing territory, seizing some of the villages in the outer parameters of Mosul. I think they've done a good job, and I think today we're now in phase 2, where we're coming closer to the city, and we see some of the issues with such a complex alliance of different state and non-state actors, particularly between the Iraqi armed forces and the Peshmerga, because the Peshmerga have advanced a little bit quicker than the Iraqi armed forces. They have seized the objectives they were supposed to seize in the first phase a lot quicker than forces continue to move as well, so that you create some sort of synergy on the ground, which is obviously the biggest challenge to this operation.
Absolutely. And looking ahead then, Andreas, when they eventually do get to the city of Mosul itself, what difficulties will they face? There are reports of trenches being dug, tunnels, and perhaps the use by Daesh of chemical weapons.
Right. Apart from Raqqa, this is absolutely the most important center for ISIS, so they will do everything to keep it, particularly because it has such a symbolic character. But we also have to, if you consider this, the last 2.5 years, ISIS has invested heavily into creating or making this a fortress, building a fortress out of the city. So they've dug trenches, tunnels. It's a huge complex system of bunkers and tunnels, where they can basically appear and reappear wherever they want, as they please. So as soon as you actually enter the city, the proper city of Mosul, right now the offensive is still kilometers, 20 to 30 kilometers away. Once you enter the city, you have to fight street by street and house by house. While even if you seize territory on the ground, there might be ISIS fighters operating underground and suddenly appearing in your rear, which make it very difficult to actually fight. It's proper urban combat. It's the most fundamental and substantial urban combat you can imagine, because at the same time you have still more than 1.2 million civilians living in the city that you need to spare, because looking forward, if you want to win this battle, if you want to win the fight in general against ISIS, you have to win over the hearts and minds of the people living in Mosul. And for that, you need to protect them as much as you can, not just from ISIL, but also from obviously the artillery fire and the air power fire that the coalition is launching onto the city. So it is a highly complex fight. You have booby-trapped houses. You have tons and tons of explosive TNT in houses. So you have traps, you have ambushes. So it's a nightmare for anybody operating in this environment once you enter the city.
Andreas, then finally, what do you think will happen to the ISIS fighters who do turn tail and run? There has been space left for them at the west of the city for them to go towards the Syrian border, perhaps towards Raqqa. Where do you expect them to pop up next? Of course, Daesh do have a habit of fleeing the fight and then popping up somewhere else.
Exactly. That's why we should be very careful when we talk about victory. We shouldn't be prematurely declaring victory, because even though ISIS might have moved out of the city, they might just regroup outside and then go in again, as they've done in the past. So, as you correctly say, there's a huge corridor towards the west of the city where ISIS fighters can leave and regroup, and this is also their main supply line towards Raqqa. So when ISIS decides that they cannot hold the city any longer, obviously that will be at a time when Mosul will be probably almost entirely flattened, then they will probably leave towards the west, towards Raqqa, and fight another day, protecting whatever they have in Syria. So a fight in Mosul, a victory in Mosul, does not mean victory against ISIS. It will be an important victory in a battle against ISIS, but it's not a victory in the war against ISIS, because they will continue fighting in Syria. We shouldn't forget that.
Absolutely, the campaign will continue. Okay, Andreas Krieg there from King's College London, joining us from Doha.